Welcome to the Saturday bonus feature of the Daily Dose of Greek. And we're going to look at Mark 15:39. Let's read it first. Idon de ha kenturion ha perestekos ex enantias autou hati hutos exepnusen apen alethos hutas ha anthropos huias theou ein. We're going to focus here on the end of this verse in a moment, asking a question of meaning, because in this feature we're dealing with the meaning of Greek and how Greek matters. But let's begin by just noting this idon is a second aorist participle building off the stem of adon. So the lexical form would be herao. So this little postpositive word de is but or so. So seeing, who is the one who saw? The centurion, not just the centurion, but the centurion who was standing ex enantias, opposite of him, so right in front of him, the centurion who was standing just right in front of Jesus, when he saw that thusly, or in this way, exepnusen, that he died, when this is the way that Jesus died, with the temple veil tearing and all the earthquake and the darkening of the sun prior to this, and all these events that surrounded his death and how he died. Apen, he said, this is the centurion, alethos, truly. Then we have, here's our subject, hutos ha anthropos, this man. Then we have our copulative verb, ein, was. Remember, eimi is a copulative verb. It links things together. It's like an equal sign. So you have a subject on one side, and you have a predicate nominative on the other side, both in the nominative case. So our subject here is this man, our copulative verb, our equal sign is ein, and then our predicate nominative is huios theou. Now, I don't know if you've run across this interpretation before, but I'll mention one that I've run across. I wish I could remember where I read this. But someone was saying, oh, well, this is remember who's speaking here. This is a centurion, right? This is not a Jew, and this is not an early believer in Jesus. He's identified as a Roman pagan person. And so when he refers to Jesus as huios theou, he's not thinking about Jesus as the Son of God. He's using this term in a non-technical sense. Jesus is a divine being or something like that. And if I remember correctly, the argument goes, well, look, it doesn't have the article. It's not saying he's the Son of God. He's a Son of God, just like the centurion might identify various other wonder workers or historical figures as sons of God. Now, there's a couple of problems with this. Okay, number one, just from a literary perspective, Mark has prepared us. I know there's a textual question about Mark 1:1, but I think the evidence is in favor of understanding Jesus identified there as the Son of God, right? It says in the beginning of Mark 1, it says, the beginning of the gospel of Jesu Christou, huiou theou, Son of God. And so there's a bit of a literary inclusio in that the gospel begins. Again, I realize there's a textual question about that, but I think the evidence is in favor of including huiou theou. He's identified as the Son of God. What that means is spelled out throughout the letter. And now here at the end of the letter, we have this climactic identification that corresponds in a inclusio-type pattern, sort of like a bookend to the initial declaration. Truly, this man was the Son of God. So that argues against identifying it as a Son of God or some sort of Roman pagan misunderstanding. There's also a significant grammatical reason to discount that interpretation. There's a pattern in Greek that we need to talk about, a rule known as Colwell's rule or Colwell's canon. That is canon in the sense of rule. This is named after a guy, E.C. Colwell, who wrote an article in the Journal of Biblical Literature published in 1933 entitled The Definite Rule for the Use of the Article in the Greek New Testament. And Colwell noticed a pattern that when you have a a definite predicate nominative. So we're talking about right? You have a copulative verb, you have several parts. You have the copulative verb, you have the subject, you have the predicate nominative. And he said, when you have the predicate nominative occurring after the copulative verb in the sentence, there's a normal pattern that the article is included for the definite predicate nominative. A definite predicate nominative will explicitly include the article there. However, if you take that predicate nominative and it's definite, and it comes prior to the copulative verb in the sentence, even when it's definite, has a very strong pattern of dropping the article. So I think, if I remember correctly, he said 87% of the time, according to his calculation, when a predicate nominative was definite and preceded the copulative verb, it would drop the article. So let's look at how this plays out specifically here. What it means, it doesn't mean that huios theou is definite. It doesn't mean it's definite 90% of the time. What it means is that if it is definite, and since it comes prior to the copulative verb, we would expect it, 87% of the time, 90% of the time, to drop the article even though it's definite. So what that means is the lack of an article here doesn't mean that it's an indefinite noun. In fact, it's just context lets us know whether it's definite or indefinite, right? If a noun has the article, it's definite. If it doesn't have the article, it may or may not be definite, and this isn't one of those rules that helps us to figure that out. So from a literary perspective, grammatically, there's nothing to prevent this from being definite. In fact, if it is definite, it appears the way we would expect. From a literary perspective, I think there's a strong argument in favor of it being definite. Just to play this out a little bit more, maybe to help it make sense to you, one place we see this variation very clearly, for example, is in John 8:12 versus John 9:5. In John 8:12, we have Jesus saying, "Ego eimi, I am, taphos tu cosmu." Right? And there, what we have, right, is we have the subject, we have the copulative verb, we have the predicate nominative coming after the copulative verb having the article, showing explicitly its definiteness. We have the same expression in John 9:5, slightly rearranged. We have phos eimi to cosmu, Jesus speaking here again, I am the light of the world, but in this case, copulative verb eimi, notice the predicate nominative comes before the copulative verb, and even though clearly it's the same statement, Jesus is not just a light of the world, he's the light of the world, it has dropped the article, according to Colwell's description of that pattern, that convention, even though it's definite. So I hope that explanation of Colwell's rule is clear enough to you, and I hope that's something that will help you as you continue to read and study the Greek New Testament.